Dick Rodgers. This is a bit in the section called About Us. I wanted to let you know a little bit about this endeavour in a more rounded kind of a way. There's a committee of three of us, me and a couple called Roy and Nancy Hughes, who are long-standing friends, professional people. I respect them a lot, and I'm very grateful indeed for their support, so that I'm not alone in this. And I meet quite a lot of people. The Common Good Party at the moment isn't a membership organisation, partly because these thoughts are very precious to me, and I don't want them derailed by somebody coming and taking them over. But I recognise that a party can't remain like that forever, but I do want to establish a brand and a way of doing things which I want to be seen as wise, thoughtful, peaceful, polite, and winsome. And I want to use my intelligence, which I have been given. I'm a slow reader, so I can't claim to be an expert in all the fields, but what I am a professional at, and I proudly claim to be, is I'm a citizen, and I have a great interest in the nation and the world around me. And although I can't be an expert on everything, I do see that everything has its importance, and I want to learn. And I think it's important to do so and to have a go. Now, I'm a very blessed person. I've had a good start in life. I'm 64 now, and my life's getting going. I had really good parents. My dad was born in India, came to India when he was 12, and went to King's College School, Wimbledon, and medical school, and became a surgeon at Bart's Hospital. Went away to the war as an army surgeon, was decorated for his work in North Africa. Earlier on in France, he stayed behind, volunteered to stay behind in charge of a hospital which was to be overrun by the enemy, because the only alternative was a Jewish surgeon. And at the last minute they sent back an ambulance and picked him up, so he wasn't actually taken captive. But he was a great bloke, my dad, and I respected him a great deal. He died in 2001 at the age of 93. And he was his main part of his career was as professor of surgery in Belfast, where he remembered all his house surgeons. I think he knew the names of all the students. At the end of his time there, he'd trained practically every doctor in the province of Northern Ireland, and he was very interested in affairs. He joined Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, as soon as just after the war, and remained very interested in world affairs. I think I've picked that up from him. My mum was a jolly good mum. She was a medical social worker, and she was just very caring and very reliable and kind, gentle person, and I'm so grateful. At the age of 5, I became a Christian on a beach in Cornwall at a beach mission, when somebody told me about the sacrificial love of God for me, that a lamb died so that I didn't need to die. You might think that's psychologically way out, but I think that's a true reflection of Christianity, that Jesus died for us so that we could have a full and abundant life. And I see the real importance that our society in Britain, our relationships also more personally, but Britain and the world, that the way we do things together, the way we live together, should be a reflection of the character of God, who is pro-people, and he wants to bring the whole of human society to a glorious conclusion, a glorious state in which all relationships are wholesome and good, and where suffering and dying and pain doesn't exist anymore. But there's a lot of work to do to bring the world to that state, and it's not just for us to just sort of sit back and say, okay, God, you can do it all. He wants us to have compassion on people and to shape our society in a good and wholesome way. and to get immersed in the affairs of the world. And he makes that quite clear. The Lord's Prayer, in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus teaches us, your kingdom, we should pray, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And he also praises the sheep who go out and are kind to people and go and visit people in prison and look after the homeless and the naked and so on, and accepts them and elevates them to a place of honour. The goats think they've done everything right, they've done the religious bit, but they haven't actually cared about people. They just didn't put themselves in that way. And that's, Jesus in his parable does not honour those people. And so that means that we should be interested in the world and should care about the world around us. And it's a really important theological message, because although it's so simple, we as a nation have wandered away from that, and we are the poorer for it. We have a world role, not to go bossing everybody around, but to understand the world we're in and see where we can be of influence for good, particularly in places where there is human suffering and where there is tyranny and hunger and war. And we should crack on and get on with it. It's not something that we do over against somebody else. France, Germany, and all these other countries. We should collaborate about these things, and as far as we can. So that's sort of my theology. My potted CV is that I went to school initially in Belfast, and then to Monkton Combe School in near Bath in Somerset, and then Bart's St Bartholomew's Hospital Medical School in London, and qualified there in 1970. Did junior hospital jobs, but then in the winter, I think it was the winter of discontent, certainly the 3-day week, older people may remember this, that there was one time when there was only electricity available on 3 days of the week, and I wanted to get my car undersealed. I bought a second-hand car, and they didn't underseal them very well in those days, and there was only electricity on 3 days of the week, and so it had to be fitted in with that, and I thought, what a shambles. There must be, I want to try and engage with what's gone wrong, and I mean, I'm still working at it, and so I asked if I could be ordained in the Church of England, and they accepted me. You might think that's a sort of loose step. How did that feeling of impatience with the nation lead to ordination? Well, I can see it in retrospect. I think the church should have something to say about that kind of thing, and I didn't hear it saying it. So, but I haven't been a sort of model vicar or anything. I've never been a vicar. I went to St John's College, Nottingham, and was a curate in Derby, and met my wife there. And then I went actually back to surgery at that stage and got my fellowship with the College of Surgeons, and was an orthopaedic registrar in Wales, and then in Birmingham. That's why I live in Birmingham now. And I've sort of been in and out of medicine since, because during the time in Birmingham, I heard about people in prison in Russia who didn't, I couldn't see why they should be in Russia. They were in prison. They were in prison unjustly, and so I started visiting them. Somebody put me in touch with people to go and visit with little presents from Christians in England, and I met some amazing families of people who are in the Soviet Gulag, the labour camps and prison and so on, prison psychiatric hospitals and things, and it made a deep impression on me. But then I thought, why should these people be in prison? They shouldn't be there. So I then I resigned my medical job. Not because I didn't like it, but because I felt particularly called to intervene with this, and I took up the case of a young lady called Irina Ratushinskaya, a poetess, and I locked myself up in a replica of her labour camp cell, in a church in Birmingham for 6.5 weeks of Lent 1986 on bread and water, had my hair shaved, wore prison clothes, and slept on a hard board with one blanket, and people kept me company, and people wrote to the Soviet embassy, and eventually she was released, which was great, and she came to live in England, and she's actually now back in Moscow, and she's kept her integrity, and she's a great woman. I wrote a book about it called Irina by Dick Rodgers, which is still available on Amazon, I think, for 1 penny, and and then I took up the case of another 5 people, one at a time, going round Western governments, going to the Foreign Office, going across to Washington, and lobbying for people to take up her case with the Soviet authorities, and the case of these other people. And one by one, they all came tumbling out, and then the Berlin Wall fell. So God bless that. And then I had to get a job. So I got a clergyman job, but I got very frustrated with that. And then I went back to medicine. I did some locum jobs and so on. And then I campaigned for an end to the North-South war, civil war in the Sudan, which was causing terrible suffering. 2 million people had died. And I worked on that full-time in a voluntary capacity from 1993 to 1997, when the family really had enough, and so I stopped that. But I visited, I sort of traipsed around government buildings in Khartoum, and I went into the bush in southern Sudan to meet the leaders of the rebels, and advocated that they settle the war by having a properly free referendum. And although I stopped doing that ages ago, that has now eventually just happened. So I took up the Soviets, and I took up Sudan, and both have been successful, although there were lots of other people working on both. And so I come round to my third job. Well, after that I worked at the Children's Hospital as a clinical assistant, looking after children's fractures, which was great. It was a very nice job from 1997 to 2004. But then with Roy and Nancy, I started this Common Good Party, and I've stood in lots of elections. I don't generally get anywhere much. I get sort of 100 to 500 votes. In the European election in 2004 I got 8,650, which was a high point, but of course it's a much bigger constituency. And I've taken up the various things which I think are illustrative of my message as a whole, such as I've tried very hard to stop them selling the port of Dover to the highest bidder, which I think would be awful. We need it. It's part of our infrastructure, part of the equipment of our nation, and lots of other things like that. And I think it's very important that we honour the military, and I have put quite a bit of effort into trying to promote that. Now, so where am I aiming? Do I want to be an MP? Do I want to be the government? Whatever. It's less important to me what happens to me. And by the way, nobody pays me. I'm not in the pocket of anybody. I've saved up a bit, and Mum and Dad left me a bit of money, so we live simply on that. And so everything I do is at the bottom end of the budget way of doing things. But I want to. I do want to get somewhere with this. I want to change the ethos of the country, and it's less important to me actually to get elected than to get the ideas taken seriously. I mean, the Green Party, for instance, have got green ideas into the public consciousness without actually, you know, they have one MP now, but they haven't electorally had huge success. But it's a matter of promoting a vision and a way of feeling about ourselves. And I want people to get, you know, I want British people to be able to get to the end of their lives and be able to look back and think, I've been part of something I really respect. I have actually contributed to making the world a better place. And I think that would be really great. So about these various issues which I have detailed on the website, and I think it is worth taking them up. Trouble is that it's in a sense very boring donkey work to do it, to write to your MP. I've written to my MP a lot. He knows me, and I think he's tedious. He's finds I don't know what he thinks about it, but and then I stand against him, and he wins overwhelmingly. And but I think he respects what I'm trying to do. I don't know quite. I expect he'll listen to this, and but. The trouble is that the government has worked out a way you can write letters to people till you're blue in the face, and it's really hard to make a difference. But if lots of people write, and they write to their MP, particularly if they write to their MP asking him to bring it to the attention of the relevant minister, then a letter does come back from the minister. The minister will have not written it himself, he'll have had civil servants write it, but at least it'll cross his desk and it'll get his signature, so it raises concern. See, I mean, all that kind of thing is lobbying, basically, but I think it does reach places. I think it does influence things, and it's better alternative than doing nothing. But really, in a democracy, the thing to do is to say what you want to say, and to try and say it as you know, articulately and persuasively as you can, and to say it to friends, and to, you know, maybe even stand in the street with a banner or something, which I do quite a bit of. Sometimes feel embarrassed and fold up on myself and not do it for a bit, but there are ways open to us. But crucially, you see. I think the reason I formed it into a political party is that unless it's a political party, you can just sort of come out with bland pronouncements about things, particularly when it comes to Christianity applying to public life. Some people come out with lots of bland pronouncements, or they lobby about particular issues. But I think there is a place for following it through, and just being that little bit of a political threat to the people who are presently the government or presently the major opposition parties. And it probably looks laughable to them, but I think that if I can get my act together, and if you would kindly take seriously what I'm trying to say, come back to me and take issue with things, and educate me, inform me about things that you're an expert at and I'm not, I would really appreciate that. And I can't at the moment quite see all the steps between becoming an electable, between where I am now and becoming an electable party. But you know, let's go for it. I'm happier being on the job, trying to get to such a situation, even if it, you know, only a bit of it rubs off on the way. So I want to have a go at influencing British society to being much more wholesome, much more interested in the world around us, much more inspiring of its young people to get a good education and be part of something really dynamic and influential as they grow up. And I think it has to be right. I can't really see anybody saying that it's not right. I quite appreciate that one might differ about the details, particularly about the balance between what the government does and what commerce does. One thing I do want to nail is that since we're poor now and the government hasn't got much money, that commerce has to be the way we go forward about things that we do in-house, which I think we should be doing in-house. I think an alternative to that is getting our act together and people being prepared to put their back into public service and doing a lot of things organised by the government rather than organised by commerce, like the railways, like the NHS, like power generation and so on. Things that we did together before Mrs. Thatcher. I think there was some feathering one's own nest. And I mean, I don't know about the dockers. Maybe the dockers were a bit protective and didn't act in the interest of the nation as a whole, but in their own, to protect their own interests. And there's always that. I mean, doctors do that as well, I'm afraid. So I think that if we care more about the public service and the vision of the whole national vision, if we want it to succeed, it will succeed, or at least it's much more likely to succeed. So that's where I'm going, and I would love to have your support and your interest and your correction, and if you want to help financially a little bit, that's also great. But thank you very much indeed, and let's see where we go. Thanks a lot. Bye.